Center. Since this is being webcast and some of those not in Washington may not be real sure what the Wilson Center is, let me have 2 minutes of advertising time. The Woodrow Wilson Center is a public-private partnership created by the U.S. Congress more than 40 years ago as the nation's official memorial to President Wilson. The center seeks to provide a bridge between the world of ideas and the world of public affairs by sponsoring research and meetings such as this one and publications featuring leading thinkers and distinguished public officials from around the world. We seek through our work to commemorate and to promote two of President Wilson's principal concerns, sound scholarship and good public policy. Today we examine events that took place in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, 40 years ago. I think it's something we can all agree on that what transpired there 40 years ago was a great human tragedy. We understand that some people find memories of that time so painful that they prefer not even to discuss these events. Indeed, we're aware that some have opposed the Wilson Center hosting this event today. The Wilson Center takes a different approach. We believe in the value of informed dialogue, of free debate. We do not believe that any one person or one group has a monopoly on truth. We do believe that the best way to achieve a closer approximation of truth is by placing a microscope on both the events of the past and the present. And that's what we're going to hope to do today. To be clear, the Wilson Center as an institution does not take positions on controversial issues. The Wilson Center does not have an institutional opinion on what happened in East Pakistan in 1971. But we do firmly believe that important events deserve serious and reasoned and fact-based exploration. And that, too, is what we hope to do today. As I said, a great human tragedy took place in Bangladesh 40 years ago. Another great tragedy is unfolding in Japan, even as we meet here today. Our thoughts and our prayers reach out to the people of Japan as they struggle to cope with the consequences of a horrific earthquake and a deadly tsunami. And I'd like now to ask those in this room, some of whom were witness to the events in Bangladesh 40 years ago, I'd like to ask all of you to join me in a moment of silence in memory of the victims of both tragedies, that which transpired 40 years ago and that which is unfolding before us today. Thank you. We'll now move on to today's proceedings. We will first hear from the author of the new book, Dead Reckoning, Memories of the 1971 Bangladesh War. In fact, she told me she only got her copies of the book, or a copy of the book, a day or two ago. Sarmila Bose is a senior research fellow in the Department of Politics and International Relations at Oxford University. In addition to being an academic and a scholar, she also has a long career in journalism. She taught briefly for those here in Washington at George Washington University as well. She was educated at Bryn Mawr, did her doctoral work at Harvard. As you came in, you may have noticed a table out in the lobby out there where copies of her book are for sale. And following this event, I'm quite sure she'd be happy to inscribe a copy for you. Following Sarmila's presentation, which will go on for roughly 30 minutes or so, we'll then turn to Arnold Zeitlin, who will offer some briefer comments. Arnold holds several positions at present, including he teaches in the journalism program at Guangdong University in China. He's a visiting professor at the Journalism and Media Studies Center at Hong Kong University, and he's managing director of a Virginia-based media consulting firm. So he straddles two worlds, China and the United States at the present time. But he also has a long, distinguished history in journalism, primarily, though not exclusively, with the Associated Press, for whom he served as their South Asia correspondent and their Pakistan bureau chief during the 1971 war in East Pakistan, where he was witness to many of the developments there, and indeed was one of the very first to report on to the rest of the world on what was happening in Dhaka and elsewhere in East Pakistan. Arnold holds a master's in journalism from Columbia University. So, Sarmila, we turn things over to you, and we're very anxious to hear from you.
Thank you, Bob. It's a great pleasure to be back at the Wilson Center, and thank you all for coming. As the book has just been published, and most of you, if not all of you, have not had the chance to read it yet, I thought I'd start by giving a brief overview of the structure and content of the book. The book contains many details about many different incidents during the 1971 conflict. So in the time allotted to me today, after giving you the overview, I'd like to focus on one particular finding of the book, the imaginary friends and demonized foes produced by the ethnicization of war by the nature of Bengali nationalism in 1971. I'm happy to talk about the rest of the book, any part of it, during the Q&A. The book is organized roughly chronologically while exploring the thematic contours of the conflict through a detailed study of particular incidents. The chapter 1, Call to Arms, highlights some of the overlooked or misrepresented aspects of the 1970 general elections, the subsequent failed negotiations, and the nature of the Bengali nationalist agitation that erupted in East Pakistan. For instance, it examines the repeated misrepresentation of the Bengali uprising as a non-violent, non-cooperation movement, when in reality it was openly and proudly armed and militant. In seeking the legitimacy and moral authority associated with Gandhian movements against British imperialism, such claims marginalize the more pertinent Bengali legacy of militant revolutionary movements against the British. It shows also, for example, how the militancy and violence of the Bengali nationalism in 71 was a chaotic one, not an organized one under a national leadership. The national leadership was involved then in a double game of public incitement on the one hand and private negotiation for power on the other. Chapter 2, Military Inaction, focuses on the period 1st March to 25th March, when East Pakistan appeared to be ruled by a parallel government of Sheikh Mujib's decrees. However, while Sheikh Mujib's word appeared to be law, he had not taken up the responsibilities of governance. So the regime's abdication of authority during this period created a state of lawlessness with many casualties. Doing nothing is also a policy option and was a disastrous policy choice at that time, just as the even more disastrous policy decision to take military action on 25th March. Chapter 3, Military Action, investigates the start of the military crackdown to suppress the Bengali rebellion, examining in detail the attack by the Pakistan Army on Dhaka University on 25th-26th March. It addresses several questions such as whether there were armed militants, whether there had been a two-way fight or one-sided massacres, how many people had been killed, who they were, what happened to their bodies. It details the attack on the student halls, the treatment of prisoners, the killing of faculty members such as Professor Jyotirmoy Guha Thakurta in their quarters, and the murder of non-Bengali staff who lived on campus. Chapter 4, Uncivil War, chronicles and analyzes through 10 different incidents the bitter and bloody civil war that engulfed the province in the following weeks. This includes, among others, the army attack on the Hindu area called Shakharipara in Dhaka, the killing of non-Bengali personnel and their families in Joydevpur and Ghazipur, the massacre of non-Bengalis in the jute mill colonies of Khulna, battles between the army and rebel fighters in Tangail and Kushtia, and fratricidal bloodletting in Kumilla. Chapters 5 and 6, called Village of Widows and Hounding the Hindus respectively, focus each on single major incidents during the war. Chapter 5 examines the widely made allegations of civilian massacres by the armed forces during the conflict, with a detailed treatment of a massacre at a village called Thanapara in Rajshahi on 13th of April. It uses testimony from several survivors and eyewitnesses, including some remarkable testimony by Muhammad Abdus Sattar, who was shot and set alight but survived, and also that of Muhammad Zinnatul Alam, the only man whose life was spared in that incident. And through these incidents, it examines the factors that determine life and death as the army secured the countryside for Pakistan. Chapter 6 investigates the issue of the persecution of Hindus, the minority population with the same religion as most Indians, with a close look at the massacre of Hindu refugees at a place called Chuknagar at the border of Khulna and Jasod districts on the 20th of May. Chapter 7, Hit and Run, examines several cases of the underground fighters for Bangladesh's liberation and the response of some of the army units in this long war of attrition. This includes, among others, the capture, interrogation, and extraordinary story of escape from custody of Abul Barak Alvi, the artist turned rebel fighter, and the tragic story of Rumi, one of the disappeared of 1971. Using testimony from both sides, it also interrogates several other incidents such as allegations of forced labor and mass murder at Saidpur, stories of prisoners being thrown to tigers at Thakurgaon, and another massacre of villagers at Boroitola in Mymensingh much later in the year on the 13th of October. Chapter 8, Fratricide, assesses the bitter bloodletting in the last days of the war and the first months of Bangladesh's independence, including the widely reported killing of intellectuals in Dhaka in the dying days of the war, examining in detail, for example, the killing of Dr. Alim Chaudhary, who had been providing medical help to the Mukti Jodhas. Chapter 9 brings together many different strands of the story, examining the deployment of words and numbers in the narratives of 1971 and their conflicting claims. I will now draw on the ethnicized depiction of the war by the Bengali nationalist side to demonstrate some of the paradoxical results of such a representation of the enemy and an extraordinary finding with regard to those identified as friends. The enemy as demon. In the liberation literature of Bangladesh, the term for the Pakistan army is Khan Sena. Sena means army or soldier, while Khan, as you know, is an Islamic title, which both West Pakistanis and East Pakistanis, as Bengalis as well, might have, as do many Indians. In fact, my own family had the title several centuries ago. However, in Bangladeshi accounts of 1971, the term Khan Sena applies to West Pakistani military personnel only and carries a strongly negative connotation. Curiously, the West Pakistani army officers I spoke to in the course of researching this book seemed unaware that they are collectively referred to as Khan Sena in Bengali in the context of 71. its usage seems to be restricted to internal reference among Bengalis only. On the other hand, almost all the West Pakistani officers told me that they knew they were referred to by Bengalis in East Pakistan as Shala Punjabi, roughly translated as Punjabi bastards, regardless of whether they were really from the province of Punjab or not. However, West Pakistani officers appear to have little idea of the range of labeling used to describe them. In the Bangladeshi published material on 1971, West Pakistani army personnel are often referred to as a variety of animals. A common one is the term Punjabi kukur, Punjabi dog, which combines two labels: the lumping together of all West Pakistanis as Punjabis regardless of their actual ethnicity, and the use of an animal term meant to maximize insult. Other epithets include Borbor, barbarian, Doshu, bandit, Noro Pishach, Noro Poshu, roughly translated as human demon or human animal, hyena, Shapot, it's a word for tiger, usually combined with suitable adjectives such as hingsra hyena, ferocious hyena, and so on. The West Pakistanis are also frequently described as breaking into ullash, jubilation, and ottohashi, loud and dramatic laughter, while tormenting Bengalis, in a manner befitting villains in the style of the rustic Bengali folk theatre called Jatra, the closest approximation to which in the West would be the English pantomime. In comparison, West Pakistani labeling of Bengali rebels as miscreants, muktis, or at most Awami League thugs are feeble. In the Indo-Bangladeshi narrative, the conflict in 71 is called the Liberation War of Bangladesh, Mukti Juddho, and those who fought for the achievement of that goal, civilian or military, are referred to as the Mukti Jodhas. And these rebels are referred to in Bangladeshi publications with terms such as Beer, brave, heroic, Banglar Damal Chelera, turbulent boys of Bengal, or more affectionately as Bichura, which roughly translates as little rascals. Pro-regime East Pakistanis are called Razakars, which is used virtually as a term of abuse. Interestingly, it seems to have evolved its connotation during the 1971 conflict, so much so that Sheikh Mujib, who was imprisoned in West Pakistan since 25th March, is reported to have asked in bewilderment what is a Razakar when on his way to Dhaka to become the Prime Minister of Bangladesh in January 1972. East Pakistanis who cooperated with the regime are also referred to as Hanadadde Shahojogi or Doshor, assistants or partners of the invaders, Dalal, agent, and other similar terms. The Pakistan Army is also constantly referred to in the Bangladeshi literature as an occupying force or Hanadar Bahini, which is invaders, raiders. This is a needless misrepresentation of reality. In 71, East Pakistan was a province of Pakistan, a country created in 47 as a homeland for South Asia's Muslims, through a movement in which East Bengal played a very significant role. The Pakistan Army was present in the province, as it was in other provinces of this newly created state. Bengalis served in both the existing units of the army and new regiments, special Bengal regiments raised later. West Pakistanis served in East Pakistan. Bengali officers were posted to West Pakistan. So Bengalis who later decided that they wanted to secede from Pakistan and fight for an independent country could have termed the Pakistan Army Shotru, or enemy forces, whom they wished to eject. Instead, there's a tendency to try to erase history by labeling them as occupying or invading forces, as though they had suddenly appeared from a foreign land. While many Bengalis rebelled, some Bengali officers continued to serve in the Pakistan Army, defending what to them was still Pakistani territory. There was, after all, only one clear invading force in East Pakistan in 1971, and that was India. The portrayal of the regime as villains in the Bengali depiction of the struggle for the independence of Bangladesh also took some other interesting forms. One was visual art. One of the most memorable pieces of artwork from the period is a cartoon-style sketch of General Yahya Khan. With glowering eyes and Dracula-like teeth, he is presented as a veritable monster. As a political cartoon, it's brilliant. It's a cartoon by Kamarul Hassan. As an instrument of black propaganda, it's very effective as well, aiding the complete demonization of General Yahya, his regime, and the army. Now, as General Yahya was the head of the military regime and the person responsible for the decision to launch a military action to crush the Bengali rebellion, it's only to be expected that he would be a prime symbol for demonization by the rebels. Yet it's also supremely ironic, as indicated in the early chapters of the book, as General Yahya personally seemed not to have harbored prejudice against Bengalis. On the contrary, he accepted their economic grievances as legitimate, took steps, even if it was too late by then, to redress the imbalance in Bengali representation in the army and civil services, replaced the manipulative parity principle with one person, one vote, which ensured the more numerous Bengalis an advantage in democratic politics, held an election widely seen as free and fair, and appeared prepared to make a deal with Sheikh Mujib, the winner, whom he referred to publicly as the future Prime Minister of Pakistan. Now, another way of demonizing the enemy practiced by the pro-liberation side was to accuse the Pakistan army of monstrous actions. Now, accusing the enemy of killing non-combatant civilians, molesting women, or killing women and children are common tactics in times of war to smear the other side. Now, as some of the chapters show in detail, the Pakistan army did kill unarmed civilians in many instances. Dhaka University on 25th, 26th March, Shakharipara on 26th March, Thanapara on 13th April, Chuknagar on 20th May, Boroitola on the 13th of October, and so on. Now, as shown by the descriptions of the incidents in the book, the factual recounting of these incidents is enough to indict the involved army units of serious crimes. However, the process of demonization tends to go much further than what actually happened. The liberation literature often falls to the temptation to exaggerate the number of casualties, for example, often to absurd levels. Some stories that develop are distorted versions of actual events, others are fabrications, and yet others transfer onto the enemy the blame of monstrous actions actually committed by the Bengali liberationist side. Thus, for example, an incident in Joydevpur on 19th March is described in the liberation literature as an unprovoked firing by the army on unarmed civilians, when it was actually the result of a standoff produced by the gathering of an armed and inflamed mob. Stories of the Pakistan army attacking women at the women's hostel in Dhaka University on 25th, 26th March were widely circulated, but now seem to have been false. And the massacre of West Pakistani civilians in Jasor on the 1st of April by pro-liberation Bengalis was passed off internationally as exactly the opposite, as Bengali civilians killed by the Pakistan army. The demonization of the enemy also involves concealing or minimizing monstrous acts committed by one's own side. In the dominant narrative of the 71 conflict, the portrayal of the Pakistan army as demons is matched by a depiction of Bengalis, used to mean pro-liberation East Pakistanis, as victims. This has led to a tendency to deny, minimize, or justify brutalities perpetrated by pro-liberation Bengalis themselves. As has been shown in the book, the Bengali nationalist rebellion in East Pakistan was openly militant and quickly turned into xenophobic violence against non-Bengalis of various sorts, Biharis, West Pakistanis, and foreigners, of whom the Biharis, who arguably belonged to East Pakistan the most as they had migrated from India to settle there, ironically became the worst sufferers. In the ethnic violence unleashed in the name of Bengali nationalism, non-Bengali men, women, and children were slaughtered, for instance, in housing colonies in Chittagong, in the Kornopuli mills, in the jute mill colonies at Khulna, in the railway town of Santahar. West Pakistani businessmen were massacred in Jasor. In mutinous East Bengal regiments, Bengali officers and men often killed the greatly outnumbered and even disarmed West Pakistani fellow officers and their families. The killing of non-Bengalis continued after Bangladesh became independent, as for example in the jute mill colonies in Khulna. As the book has shown, non-Bengali victims of these ethnic killings by Bengalis numbered hundreds or even thousands per incident, an indication of the scale of these crimes. The killings were executed with shocking brutality. Some of the worst brutalities were also among Bengalis themselves, between those who were defending the integrity of Pakistan and those who were fighting for the liberation of Bangladesh. The killing of pro-liberation professionals by pro-regime death squads in the dying days of the war stands out as one of the worst crimes of the conflict. Yet brutalization and elimination of those with a different political viewpoint seem to be the hallmark of nationalist Bengalis too, as evidenced by numerous instances during the year and afterwards. As neither side rose above it, ethnic political murder descended to a vicious cycle of vengeance, and as no one was brought to justice, violence remained the dominant political currency in Bangladesh. And yet, amidst the demonization of the enemy, pro-liberation Bengalis identified some angels, those on the enemy side who acted humanely. The ethnicization of the war from the Bengali nationalist side transformed the war into a shorthand of a clash between Punjabis and Bengalis. The possibility of Bengalis on the pro-unity side, or at least on relatively neutral ground short of secession, is denied in this conceptualization, except to acknowledge the seemingly exceptional collaborators. The term Punjabi is used as a pejorative, loaded with political meaning and representing all West Pakistanis, regardless of their actual ethnicity. Biharis are marked out also as an enemy, allied with the Punjabis. Now, one of the most remarkable outcomes of my research into this aspect was the emergence of an ethnic group named by Bengali nationalists as Baluchis, whom they identified as the more humane individuals among West Pakistani army personnel. Now, Baluch tribes, as we know, are from Balochistan, the province in West Pakistan with its own rebellious history. During interviews, a wide variety of Bangladeshis in towns and villages, men and women, in different districts with different experiences of the conflict, mentioned Baluchis as a better sort among the West Pakistanis they encountered during the conflict. Every small kindness shown to Bengalis was attributed to the person being a Baluchi. The published Bangladeshi reminiscences of 71 also contain many references to humane gestures by Baluchi officers or soldiers. To give you a few examples, Mahmouda Begum Gini was just a girl when she and other women and children were separated from the men on the riverbank at Thanapara on 13th April. She related to me that some of the soldiers guarding them looked distressed and had tears in their eyes as the women wailed. The women and children were sent back to the village. The assembled men became targets of mass execution. Despite this traumatic incident, Mahmouda remembered that not all of the Pakistani army soldiers were bad. The Baluchis were the kinder ones, she said. Raihan Ali, Mahmouda's husband, recalled an incident later in the year when he, a 12-year-old boy then, had been rounded up from his home by two soldiers and put to work building a bunker by the Sarda Police Academy. An officer came by, a Baluchi, according to Raihan, and asked him who had brought him there. And when the boy pointed out the two soldiers, the officer severely reprimanded them, gave Raihan some money out of his own pocket, and told him to go home. When Abul Bark Alvi and his fellow prisoners of the Dhaka guerrilla groups were being tortured and interrogated at the martial law courts in the MP hostel in Dhaka, they were given nothing to eat or drink until an older soldier brought the prisoners some bread one night. Alvi thought the soldier was a Baluchi. Jolodhar Sengupta of the Prabortak Sangha in Chittagong wrote that he was among the few men left sheltering at the center in Dholghat on 20th of May when 5 Pakistani soldiers arrived there. According to Sengupta, he and 4 others were made to sit on the field of the school. He writes, 3 Baluchi soldiers left the field and went away. They said, "We will not shoot our elderly unarmed people." One of the 2 remaining Punjabis shot at us. Prutiti Devi has given a terrifying account of how soldiers burst into their house in Kumilla on the night of 29th March and took away her elderly father-in-law, the legislator Dhirendranath Dotto, and her Debor, younger brother-in-law, Dilip. Neither ever returned. She and her daughter were made to remain in another room during the operation, and all attempts to come out and see what was happening was prevented by, quote, young Baluchi captain who blocked their way. According to Prutiti Devi, quote, the Baluchi young man stood in front of the door until the last soldier left. Later I realized it was because of this young man that Aroma and I survived with our lives that day. It's in Bengali, I've translated it. The appearance of so many Baluchis among the armed forces serving in East Pakistan in 71 is intriguing, as the proportion of ethnic Baluch historically has been low in the Pakistan Army and other institutions of state. Also, Bengalis in East Pakistan are unlikely to be able to identify Baluchis as separate from other West Pakistani ethnicities by their mere appearance. Now, there were Baluch regiments serving in East Pakistan, of course, but Baluch regiments are not composed of ethnic Baluchis. They mostly comprise Punjabis and Pathans. In fact, during discussions with me, Pakistan Army officers who served in East Pakistan in 71 were pretty sure that there were no Baluchis in the army at the time in the eastern province. Some of the officers, especially the ones from the Baluch regiments, wondered if this certificate of good conduct from the Bengalis might be meant for the Baluch regiments as a whole. But unfortunately for them, that is not the case. The Bangladeshis use the term Baluchi in an ethnic sense, referring to particular individuals from a variety of different regiments. The other ethnic group also mentioned as relatively humane and sympathetic to the Bengalis is identified as the Pathans. There were, of course, many ethnic Pathans among officers and men of the Pakistan Army. General Yahya Khan, the president lampooned by the Bangladeshis as a monster, was a Persian-speaking Pathan. Lieutenant General Niazi, the eastern commander, was also a Pathan, though born in Punjab. Lieutenant General Arbab, who commanded the 57th Brigade, as a brigadier at the time, and took a leading role in the military action in Dhaka and Rajshahi in March and April 71, is a Pathan too. On the other hand, Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the Indian Eastern Commander and hero to Bengali nationalists, was a Punjabi, as were many other officers and men of the Indian Army. So, if there were no ethnic Baluch in the Pakistan Army in East Pakistan in 71, who were these mysterious Baluchis who tempered the military regime's suppression of the Bengali rebellion with their individual humane actions? The logical answer is that they do not exist, except in the ethnic imagination of Bangladeshi nationalists. The conflict in East Pakistan in 71 was a political battle, which was given an ethno-linguistic articulation by Bengali nationalists. Having conceptualized the conflict in terms of ethnicity rather than politics, the appearance of good guys amidst the demonized enemy poses a particular problem for the Bengali liberationists. The Bengali nationalists could have simply left it as a few exceptional, humane individuals among the Shala Punjabi, but they appear instead to have invented a whole new ethnic category. The choice of Baluchistan may have something to do with a feeling of solidarity with another oppressed and rebellious province. After all, General Tikka Khan, who was sent as governor of East Pakistan in March 71 and oversaw the military action, was also known as the Butcher of Baluchistan for quelling an uprising there. Now, how this mythical band of Baluchis took on national proportions is unclear, but Bengalis are wonderful raconteurs, and rumors do fly fast. The rebels had redefined the conflict in terms of ethno-linguistic identity so successfully that its ramifications can be seen at the level of the village. For example, while recounting the massacre of male villagers on 13th April in Thanapara, when a similar site nearby just down the river had not suffered the same fate, the villagers stated to me, as if by way of explanation but with no evidence, that the officer who did the killing in Thanapara was a Punjabi, while the officer who had gone to the other side was a Pathan. During the course of researching specific events for this book, I came across one instance of a Pakistan Army officer who was at least a resident of the province of Baluchistan. This was Captain Samad Ali of 27th Baluch Regiment, whose company was sent to Kushtia on 25th-26th March. Lieutenant Ataullah Shah, who was serving with him in Kushtia, told me that Captain Samad Ali was a Hazara, another minority group, from Baluchistan. Lieutenant Ataullah is one of only 11 men who survived out of nearly 155 men who were attacked by the rebels in Kushtia on 29th March and were ambushed as they tried to retreat to their base in Jessore. So what did Bengali nationalists do when they came across a West Pakistani who really was from Baluchistan? According to Lieutenant Ataullah, who witnessed the scene, they captured Samad Ali after the ambush, held him down by the river, and butchered him. In conclusion, demonizing enemies is common in war. Imaginary friends are common too, a familiar phenomenon of our childhood. Having defined a political conflict in ethnic terms with a stark dichotomy, of perpetrators versus victims, brutality versus humanity, and essentially good versus evil, Bengali liberationists appear to have had difficulty with accommodating the possibility of good Punjabis or brutal Bengalis. Coping with the latter has involved one form or another of denial. The humane enemy, however, has led to the conjuring up of an entirely separate ethnicity all over this war-torn land. All forms of identity are today accepted as products of our collective imagination. However, the invention of an ethnic identity as imaginary friends in a brutal war may be a unique achievement of Bengali nationalists in 1971. Thank you.
Seldom have I hosted a speaker who was asked to speak for 30 minutes and quit exactly on the moment. Arnold Zeitlin, we'll hear from you now.
Well, I've been told to speak for 10 minutes. There is so much to say that 10 minutes is not enough, but that's all right. I'll take what I can get.
We'll get you back into the conversation.
No, as a matter of fact, I'm
afterwards.
going to, when I have time, I'm going to extend this discussion and complete my remarks on the internet. And I would be happy to include the people in this room if they're interested. Let me know your email address, and I will circulate what I will do. There's just not enough time to deal with everything that I would like to say about this book. This book revived many vivid and sometimes very difficult memories for me, especially during the month of March of 1971. I started collecting my books, and I decided to bring them all here just to show you that there have been many books with many people saying many different things. This is sort of my Exhibit B. I think that Professor Bose has done a service to history through her interviews by putting a human face to the accounts of those horrific times. That is a great service. But these revelations, if in fact they are revelations, are certainly not new. My first trip to Dhaka was December 1969, when Professor Bose was 10 years old. And when I arrived in Dhaka that day, Bengalis and Biharis were killing each other. And Admiral Ahsan, who was the military governor at that time, declared a state of emergency. I was very impressed. This was my first introduction to violence in Pakistan. I had come 2 or 3 months before from 3 years of covering civil war in Nigeria, where the eastern state of Nigeria, known as Biafra, tried to secede from the federal government. In fact, what I saw in Dhaka during my first visit so impressed me that my first dispatch from Dhaka forecast that East Pakistan was going to be the next Biafra. And I remember my foreign editor in New York cabling me a message saying East and West Pakistan were separated by 1,000 miles of India. How are they going to get at each other? And I responded that I didn't know, but I thought they would find a way. And 15 months later, they did. This is not new. The killings of non-Bengalis, of Biharis, of Bengalis runs deep. And if an outsider like myself saw it almost immediately, I think this was fairly general knowledge throughout South Asia at that time, before and certainly since. Now, I understand that Professor Bose is trying to balance accounts of the atrocities. I assume that the title, Dead Reckoning, in a sense, refers to the reckoning of the dead. I think anecdotal reporting, statistics obscure the fact that if one Bihari woman or Bengali woman was raped, or one Bengali intellectual was killed, or one Bihari auto mechanic was killed, in each case that was one too many. Numbers maybe are not that important. We're still talking about how many Jews died in Europe under the Nazis. We're still talking about the Armenian genocide by the Turks, on and on and on. It's time that we got on beyond that. In fact, I think the focus on atrocities, on killings, obscures the major story of this conflict. This was not about killing. It was about a struggle for self-determination. Professor Bose writes, "What matters is the nature of the conflict, which was fundamentally a complex and violent struggle for power among several different parties with a terrible toll." You bet it was. And so are most conflicts. You can say the same about what's happening in Libya today, what happened when U.S. forces invaded Iraq. This is a given. I find in this book a chronicle of hatred. Bengalis, Biharis, Punjabis, Baluchis, whatever. The intense hatreds that were stirred up between 1970 and 71 and 72, some of which I witnessed, needs explanation. And that's what I don't find in this book. I imagine a reader with little knowledge of the founding of Pakistan would wonder, after reading, why these people hated so deeply. That needs review. What was behind these killings? You can go back more than a half a century. Jinnah and his insistence on Urdu as a national language, although more than half the people of New Pakistan spoke another language, Bengali. Ayub Khan had no great love for Bengalis, an attitude that pervaded the West Pakistani elite and the Punjabi and Pathan-dominated officer corps in the army. Dr. Bose writes about the demonization of Yahya Khan. I remember sitting close to Yahya in the fall of 1970 in the VIP room of the Dhaka airport where he landed after a trip to China. He had come after a devastating tidal bore carried away 300,000 people in East Pakistan. And he sat in that little room, and next to him was a little Bengali press officer who was actually shivering with fright. And I remember Yahya turned to him and growled, said, "I don't like you." He was drunk. He was drunk on the 22nd of November, the night that Indian troops moved into East Pakistan. I was at the Intercontinental Hotel that night, and he was at a reception. And when he came out of that reception, I and other journalists, Bob Chaplin including, asked him about his reaction to reports of Indian attacks. And all he did was look at me, and he said, "I know you. I know you." He was drunk that night. I'd like to read something I received from a retired officer who, more than any single man, I think, was responsible for the dumping of Yahya at the end of the war. A man by the name of F.B. Ali. Talking about Yahya. By 1970-71, he was an alcoholic who spent most of his time in a drunken haze and didn't really direct or control policy. This was made by others around him and okayed by him. These people had no intention of letting East Pakistan rule or separate. The so-called deal with Mujib, if I remember right, was just camouflage to give the army time to prepare for the crackdown. Now, this is another side of Yahya Khan that is not expressed in this book. I think it's worthy of investigation. Certainly, it's worthy of mention. This was an unstable man. And in fact, the three key leaders, Mujib, Bhutto, and Yahya, were all extremely flawed human beings. I had the privilege of getting rather close to both Bhutto and Mujib. And in fact, I still to this day have a certain affection for both of them. I was a very lucky journalist at that time. They gave me access. They were very human beings. We just heard talk about a double game. They were all playing double games. It was an incredible time. I remember Bhutto in a drunken haze in Peshawar in the home of his Lieutenant Sherpal, telling me, one, that he was not going to go to East Pakistan. This was in February 1971. But also telling me that he was thinking of a solution that involved two prime ministers. When I got to Dhaka in early March, before the famous speech on 7th March, Mujib called me in. It was rather incredible in my experience, because when you go to number 16 on Dhanmondi,
Number 32.
32 on 16th, what is it?
32.
Yeah, 32, okay. Excuse me, I think I have a seizure of not Alzheimer's, but someheimer's. He called me in, and I was alone with him. The only time that house was full of people, as you may know. Nobody ever saw anybody alone. What did Bhutto say? Yeah. And I told him. And he said, if that's what he wants, I agree. And I thought I had a great scoop. In fact, I went right from his house to the telegraph office right next to the Purbani Hotel and sent a dispatch reporting that there was a basis for agreement between Mujib and Bhutto. And by the time I got back to my room at the Purbani, my phone rang, and someone on the other end said, Sheikh wants you to retract that story. Obviously, someone had called him right from the telegraph office. And I said, let me talk to Sheikh. And he got on the phone and he said, you misquoted me. And I said, you know I didn't misquote you. And then he said, that story will get me in trouble in West Pakistan. I said, okay. I said to myself, this man may be the next prime minister of Pakistan. I didn't want to alienate him. I went right back to the telegraph office to see. I told him that if that story had not gone, I would take it back. But when I got to the telegraph office, maybe a half an hour or an hour before, since I sent that story, they were on strike. And you couldn't get in. And that story went. And the next day it was broadcast on all India radio. And that gave an opportunity for Sheikh to save my life, which he did. He denied the story on all India radio. He didn't deny the Associated Press story. He denied the All India Radio story. Had he denied the Associated Press story, I think I would have been in trouble in Dhaka. And this is a war story, and it has not too much to do with the book. There are so many things that I would like to question, and as time is running out, of course, so there won't be too much time. I notice, let's see, for example, Professor Bose suggests that by May, June of 1971, the rebellion in East Pakistan had lost its steam. And in fact, she quotes a friend of mine, Mort Rosenblum, as having written in a dispatch, and I see if I can find that. I got it here somewhere. That after he had gone on a guided tour, let me see, I think I have it here somewhere. Oh, dear. Well, after carefully putting everything aside, I don't think I can find it. But, here. She quotes it. Mort wrote that the Bengalis were in a state of submissive inactivity. And he recalls that dispatch and says, this passion for independence was just sparking to full flame. Wonder what would have happened if they had Facebook and Twitter. These are factors that are worth exploring. And it hasn't been done. There's so much more to this story than appears in the book. And I'll wind up. I was trying to think of a word that would sum up the book. And the only word I could come up with was ingenuous, in terms of artless and naive. This was supposed to be a revision of history. But what it is a distortion of history. And I'm not trying to be rude. And this is one of the reasons I brought all these books. All of these books contain history of Bangladesh and the struggle. Excuse me. There's a book here by Dennis Cooks, who's over here. There's a book here by Steve Cohen. There's also a book here. They're all distortions. They're all seen through the prism of the author, as I think this book was.
Great.
The story of the killings and the sacrifices of 1970-71 has not yet been told in a rational manner. And the people who died and the people who survived deserve something better than they have gotten, despite some good scholarship here. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. I want to get to you. Sarmila, I would like to give you just 2 minutes, please, to address one or 2 points, because I want to get out here. So if you'll keep it very brief.
Will do. There are many books. I'll just say that at the end of my book, I have a chapter-length appendix where I discuss all the published works, and it's kind of an annotated commentary on the bibliography. That many of the stories of the killings and so on are not new. I agree it was not new at the time. In fact, some of them were covered in the foreign press in particular. But I have grown up in Calcutta with the dominant narrative, which has submerged a lot of these details. And there's a need, I believe, to actually go into the facts again. I agree that a long view is very pertinent, and in fact I recommend to you also Christian Gerlach's new book, in which he on extremely violent societies, in which he has a long chapter on East Pakistan, and he also recounts some of the earlier conflicts and violence and killings much before 71. I agree that numbers don't matter ultimately, and that it's the nature of the conflict that matters. Mr. Zeitlin had said that mine is a chronicle, and of course it is a chronicle of hatred. I'm afraid I'm looking at 71. And he has not found enough of explanations. As you would expect, I don't entirely agree with that, but I think it's very important to emphasize the chronicling, because this is a very poorly documented conflict, and it really needs, at the grassroots level, chronicling. Without that, we don't have the data to do any analysis or explanation. About the points about General Yahya and so on, I cover a bit of the macro policy and background in the first chapter, but my book is not about that level of policy. For that, I recommend Sisson and Rose's book, for example, as a very good researched book. But my work really focuses at the other end of the spectrum, as he said at the beginning of his comments, on the people who are affected. It humanizes the war. As for the last point, that, well, if all of the books he mentioned are distortions of history in his view, I'm not sure what we can all collectively say. Naturally, I reject that. I suggest to all of you present that you take the opportunity to read the book and come to your own conclusions, and I will be happy with that.
Fair enough. Okay, I see lots of hands. Now, we can do this in a rational way. And give a number of people a chance, or we can have one or two people monopolize the microphone for the entire time. I'm not going to allow the second. I'm going to try to be fair, but I cannot be fair unless you help me. I'm going to start with these two gentlemen because they've been most eager. But, number one, wait till the microphone gets to you. Number two, identify yourself. Number three, just a minute. Number three, 3 minutes maximum, please. It would be if you want to make a statement, that's fine, 3 minutes. It would be useful for a discussion, however, if you actually ask a question within the 3-minute time frame. You first, sir, and then you.
Okay. My name is Jamal Hassan. I'm an author and co-editor of the book Beyond Jihad, Critical Voices from Inside Islam. Ms. Bose has already said basically much about the humanistic side of the Pakistani army and the Yahya regime, especially Yahya Khan. And she clearly articulated Yahya did not personally harbor prejudice against Bengali, as Zeitlin probably missed that particular quote. But Zeitlin could remind me, because I cannot say all the hierarchy of Pakistani establishment. I'm quoting Mushahid Hussain Saeed. He was once in the cabinet or secretariat of Yahya Khan before 1971. I can quote from a 1982 magazine. After the 70s election, when Awami League got great majority of the votes in the Pakistani Assembly, Yahya jumped out of his seat, which is quoting from Mushahid Hussain Saeed. I think he was later on cabinet member and under PPP, probably under
Nawaz.
Nawaz. Okay, under Nawaz. He said, "Oh, the black Bengalis have won." That clearly implies what prejudice Mr. Yahya Khan. And within 3 minutes, I want to say that Yahya Khan, not only he was Pathan, but he represented the Punjabi hegemonistic racist group, which is still subjugating the people of Balochistan and Sindh, and they are suffering the same kind of problem that East Pakistan suffered in the last 20-some years after 1947.
Thank
And
you, sir. If
that's
you
my
will
point.
share the microphone. And again, I commend the gentleman for 3 minutes, if you would reciprocate.
My name is Dr. Nabi. I was the freedom fighter of Bangladesh Liberation War, and I'm the author of this book, Bullets of 71, A Freedom Fighter Story. This book contradicts whatever she wrote in her book, what she mentioned. So in short, I can say this is
Have you
not
read her book, sir?
her description, whatever she said, based on that. And also I have some conversation with Arnold. So she conveniently missed that it was a liberation war, It was a universal struggle. And what led to the liberation war, this liberation movement, where these Bengalis started this movement from 1948 because they were considered as a second-class citizen and their political rights, economic rights were denied. That led to the win of election by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He was supposed to be the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Instead, Parliament was postponed. So she conveniently forget that chapter and then tried to glorify the Pakistani army and demonize the freedom fighters. Freedom fighters are glorious part of the human history. And I am proud to be. All the incidents she mentioned in the liberation movement, liberation war, I was there. I was an activist. I faced the first bullet of Pakistani genocide on the campus on 26th March. So I'm really disappointed in the name of scholastic exercise. A distortion has been done and 3 million people were killed, 200,000 women were raped. This is a disservice to those victims of human crimes by Ms. Bose. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would just pass right across to Dr. Singh here. Sarmila, I haven't gotten a question yet. When we get a couple of questions, then we will give you and also Dr. Zeitlin a chance to respond.
My name is I.J. Singh. I'm at the National War College. I don't have the emotional involvement one way or the other. I've been 40 years here. I think it is true to say that looking at such a vast human event with massacres and historical changes on either side, scholarship cannot end. I mean, we're still talking about the Holocaust. I take this book for what it is. It's memories of the 1971 Bangladesh War. It is a self-limiting statement, right, of memories of people. We can look at it from the Mukti Bahini point of view, we can look at your bravery, we can look at the political level, we can look at the shenanigans by Bhutto. But these are memories of people who were involved. This does not mean that attempts have been made to redefine history and rewrite it. It is to be taken at exactly the level it is at, in my opinion, which is that these are memoirs, anecdotal memoirs, of a very, very difficult time. And I wonder whether Sarmila thinks the same too.
Okay, let's collect one more question. Let's go over here, and then we'll give both of our respondents an opportunity. Microphone's coming at you. Again, I commend all three of our first interlocutors for their brevity.
I'm Anis Ahmed. I'm from Voice of America. I think Sarmila is right in a sense when she says that the Pakistani army were often referred to as Khan Sena, and Pakistanis were rather very soft in calling the Mukti Bahini miscreants. But she misses the actual point. Miscreant was a kind of word which the Pakistanis Pakistanis in those days, very intentionally used, because they didn't want to use the word Mukti Bahini. They didn't want to use the word freedom fighters. So this was through the Pakistani propaganda machinery that they called all the people, whoever were fighting, were miscreants. In most cases, they also said that they were Indian miscreants. So it was not without certain deliberate reasons. As far as the question of Khan Sena is concerned, or certain other negative connotation, let's move on to the question of the semantics of war. Because that is the point where actually Dr. Bose misses that the point that there are certain semantic issues involved in it, and all semantic issues have to be taken not out of context. No one in Bangladesh now calls the present Pakistani army Khan Sena, remember. The Pakistani army in those days were called Khan Sena. This had a very reasonable reason behind it. Question of Pakistanis calling Pakistani forces that were called occupying forces to my opinion, was absolutely legitimate, because they were called occupying forces after 26th March. 26th March was the day when independence of Bangladesh was declared. Now, after the declaration of independence, any foreign forces, and that includes Pakistani forces as well, would be very logically called occupying forces. Question came up about the double game.
And this will be your last point, sir.
Yes, this is the last point. Question came about of the double game. For example, yes, Sheikh Mujib certainly had kept the door open for negotiation. But then the election and the negotiation gave Sheikh Mujib a legitimacy to declare independence. If he had declared independence or went on a direct fight, then it would not be globally and internationally legitimate. Authors like Professor Sarmila Bose would say that Bengalis have rebelled. But it was not a rebellion, it was not a civil war, it was quite clearly war of liberation or war of independence. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarmila, would you like to respond to any of these? And then Arnold, I'm going to give you an opportunity if you wish as well. But we want to have another several rounds of questioners, so keep your comments brief, please.
The first two gentlemen said, they have read my book, said that even after hearing me today, that I have written something about the humanistic side of the Pakistani regime or glorified the Pakistani army, when you would have hopefully got from my description of the chapters that most of the chapters describe massacres by the Pakistani army. So I'm really, there's very little you can do if some of you insist on sticking to a position regardless of what I write. IJ, yes, indeed, I hope that mine is the first of hopefully many more works of scholarship, and in fact some of them are in the pipeline that I know of. And this is also a comment for a little bit for Mr. Zeitlin. I mean, it's not possible in one book to write everything that could be written about this vast and complex conflict. So I have only tried to chronicle and come to some understanding of certain incidents on the ground and learn something from them about the greater conflict. But I very much hope that there'll be many other books, I expect there'll be many other books in the future that go into more details about many other aspects that I could not go into. And collectively, we gather the knowledge and we all learn and form a stronger basis for explanation and understanding. I don't think I have a comment on the last gentleman.
Fine. All right. Arnold, you want to say anything at this point?
Just briefly,
Okay.
there have been a lot of books. This is just a small sample. Let me finish. I'd like to refer to my friend F.B. Ali once more, because he makes a very good point about the Pakistani army. My view is that the Pakistan army, I'm quoting him, being a professional military force, should be held to a higher standard than the rebels, and are thus more culpable. Also, because the scale of their actions were considerably more than those of the other side. Totally criminal were the actions of certain commanders who ordered atrocities to be committed. The senior officers, brigadier and above, performed poorly, with some exceptions. Many of the generals behaved terribly and should have been shot for cowardice and the war crimes that they committed by directing or allowing their troops to commit atrocities against the civilian population. Now, this is a brigadier in the Pakistani army. That's all.
Yes, sir. This gentleman here.
Thanks for the floor, Bob. This is Javed. I'm the first Secretary of Political Embassy of Bangladesh in Washington, D.C. I would be obviously very brief in my observations. You see, after, in fact, Arnold's observation after the presentation of Ms. Bose, that it is a chronicle, and we can say that flawed chronicle of hatred. After that, it's a very vivid summarization of the work as Arnold. I would like to be a bit specific in referring to some of the flaws in not just this particular write-up of Bose. Bose, in number of her write-ups, has shown that the specific cases of rapes and other atrocities were not very scientifically documented. But in none of her works, she could make any very specific instance, like where certain allegations of rape was made, but that was actually not a rape. She probably has made any such very specific, and it is an instance, a weakness of her works, not found by me, by Dr. Nayonika Mukherjee, a professor in sociology at the Department of Lancaster University, Department of Sociology at Lancaster University. This is one particular flaw that was pointed out by Dr. Mukherjee in a number of occasions. And another thing is that, let me just read it out. Eyewitnesses' accounts can also be found in the 8th volume of one of the commission reports, the Hamidur Rahman commission report established at that time to find out some cases of, to find out facts about the atrocities of Pakistan Army in then East Pakistan or Bangladesh. This is there is literature from the 1970s and research scholarships and films based on oral history from within Bangladesh, such as Akhtar 2001, Chaudhry 2001, Ghor Thakur 1996.
I think I have to cut you off here. I'm
a
sorry.
lot. So can she make any such references in her works? Thank you.
Thank you. Sarmila, why don't you respond to that? Then I'm going to recognize hand in the very back.
Just to go back to Mr. Zeitlin's point with books again, there are many books, and as I said, I have discussed them all in detail in my book. There's a chapter-length treatment of all the publications until the time I published I wrote my own book. The problem with most of them is, they're very helpful, many of them. I'm not saying they aren't, but they're really primary data, because they're written by people who were participants or who have a partisan point of view. The works by the participants are very helpful, but they're primary data. They are not systematic scholarly works, and of which the Richard Sisson and Leo Rose's book is definitely the best one that came out in 1990 or 91. But a whole spate of other books are extremely helpful, but they don't fall in the category of systematic and dispassionate research. I'm not really sure what to make of Mr. Javed's comments. He's had to read the book before he can comment on the book, and he's commenting on other writings which I don't really want to get into. So I'll leave his comments as they are, I think.
I think your question about previous writings is not inappropriate, but given limited time today, it's not fair to any of us. So, in the very back.
My name is Doja Khandekar. I'm from Bangladesh. I grew up after the Liberation War, and I definitely grew up with the story of it and not the history of it. I'll admit to that. I guess based on a lot of the comments, I wanted to, and my understanding and my opinion of everything about Dr. Bose is basically formed on the writings that are published so far. So basically, article on the rape article and several others, and not on the book. And basically, my question to you is that you mentioned that there was some ethnicization on the part of Bengalis, and I realize that a mission of yours is to reconcile fact with fiction. And I realize that you can't cover everything in your book, but in the interest of limiting the spread of the fiction, I feel like maybe you don't put enough weight on the facts. So my question to you is that you've said that the Bengalis ethnicized. There were so many colorful epithets for West Pakistanis that the Bengalis had. Do you also mention that in your book, or when you're writing? Do you balance out? Or did you find that there was also West Pakistani racial or ethnic biases about Bengalis? And I'll just throw that in there. In Ayub Khan's autobiography, he has a very colorful description of Bengalis. I think he says that Bengalis belong to the very original of Indian races, and then in many ways he says that Bengalis are still under the influence of Hindu and Indian culture. So there was that also going on in a much more academic kind of way, which I'm sure colored the the opinions of West Pakistan. So do you find that evidence as well? I mean, clearly.
Thank you. We get the question.
Thank you.
Whenever there are some descriptions by West Pakistanis of Bengalis, and wherever I found them, there are some in the book. I mean, for example, one description given just in March, when the parliament was postponed and there was an eruption of anger in East Pakistan, Bengalis were described as like a swarm of bees who had been disturbed in their hive, for example. That's one of them. Whenever I've found such descriptions, I've put them in the book. But I think the point that I was making is that the Bengalis do a much better job, actually, of the labeling. It's not only more colorful, but also more powerful. And so when I said that the West Pakistani labels were feeble, I meant that they weren't as good at labeling as the Bangladeshi nationalist side has been, certainly.
This gentleman here, and then Steve Cohen.
Thank you. My name is Arshad Mahmood, and I am the Washington correspondent for bdnews24.com. I just want to point out about your opening remarks. You said that the very movement was not non-violent as it was claimed, and I'm not quite sure on what basis you said that, because I was a college student then, and I took part in that movement along with thousands of others. I didn't see anybody carrying a gun or a machete or something. And I'm really a little surprised what led you to think or write in your book that you mentioned. And the other thing is about you said that there was hardly any Baluchi soldiers. It could be. I'm not denying that. But there are, even among the Punjabis, there are good people. And there are exceptions, and exceptions prove the rule. Again, I mean, I really don't know. I couldn't understand what is your premise. What are you trying to say by all these things?
Thank you. We got two questions. We've got to go there.
The third point is I'm sorry to ask this unpleasant question, because I have been hearing this thing as a journalist. Many people are saying that you have been paid by the ISI, the military intelligence. Is that true? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can ignore that last one if you wish.
About the non-violent struggle, I've written in detail if you were there, it's extraordinary you didn't see people carrying guns, because I've based it on a number of descriptions by lots of people who don't see anything wrong with it. All the Bengali reminiscences of the Sriti Ekattor volumes, for example, are full of it. I mean, people going to to rallies with guns, with spears, with rods and sticks, and so on, and also many descriptions of these things breaking up into violence thereafter. The other thing is that I find that there's a strand of Bangladeshi liberationists who are quite proud of this. It's quite open. For example, in the Liberation War Museum, pictures of people carrying guns and being militant is very proudly displayed, and this is very consistent with the earlier history of Bengal against the British, because there was, after the first Bengal partition in 1905, a quite radical movement. It's in the 1930s there were revolutionary movements which were violent, and all these people are valorized as national heroes in the Indian nationalist movement, and similar people are valorized in the Bangladeshi national movement. So people are quite proud of it. I don't see why not. I mean, you can identify, if you wish, in 1971 with this strand of revolutionary, armed and militant strand of earlier times in Bengal. Just as well, it's quite fitting. I don't see why there's a tendency on the part of some people later on to try to say that it was non-violent. About the Baluchi point, the point I was making, of course, was the extraordinary effect of the ethnicization of the conflict, which is actually a political conflict. The answer to your last question is no. Nobody paid me.
Steve Cohen.
Yeah. Sarmila, our question is for you. Is this on? Did you get any information or sense of what Bangladeshis, East Pakistanis, thought about the Indians, especially after the Indians intervened? They were, as you said, the only foreign intervening force. And why did the attitudes towards India change so quickly? I was in Bangladesh right after liberation, and already Bangladeshis were very hostile towards India. And Arnold, I think your point is wrong, that this is not a book about the whole thing. That's the Cecession Rose book, which Sarmila quotes at length. And finally, Moshad Hussain was probably a teenager at the time you mentioned him being after.
Yes, on the Indians, yes, there is material about the Indians. This was a very fraught and troubled alliance, and it was many of the Bangladeshis, including some of the Mukti Jodhas that I spoke to, voiced their frustration with the Indians, who were not letting them do enough for their own liberation struggle, for example. Indian army officers who have written about it have often written very critical comments about the Mukti Bahini. It's sort of the reverse, saying that they were getting in the way. So clearly this alliance, which India had forged out of its own strategic interest in trying to break up Pakistan, not out of love of Bangladeshis, was quite acrimonious and troubled right from the start, it seems. And so I must say that many of the people who were trying to fight or had volunteered and gone to India were also very divided. So there were many divisions among the Bengalis who were trying to fight the Pakistani regime. So it's actually, and you are quite right, I also quote some material about how swiftly within days of sort of greeting the Indians as liberators in the middle of December, the relationship turned sour. But perhaps it's not very surprising, given that it was quite problematic throughout the period in 1971.
Arnold, you wanted to respond to something?
Well, one.
Pull the mic closer.
I'm sorry. The show of force by the Bengalis in Dhaka in March, at least, of 1971 was rather pathetic, with students marching around and really being quite naive when you think that they would face the firepower of the Pakistani army. And as for Secession and
Arnold,
Rose,
any more naive than the Egyptian students a few weeks ago?
I would guess, I have no idea of what the makeup was of the Egyptians last month. But what I saw in Dhaka, for the most part, not some of the very influential young people who were pushing Sheikh Mujib very hard, and he was resisting as much as he could for a man who never knew how to say no. I wouldn't want to compare because I just don't know.
Fair enough.
As far as Secession and Rose, it's a Bible, and it is still valid today, but they totally ignore the fighting. It's a real gap in their study. I don't agree with you.
Got this gentleman here, and then Bryce, we're going to come down over here.
Okay, my name's Matt Nelson. I'm a fellow here at the center.
Matt, I can't see you. The lights are in my way.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you.
No problem. I have a rather different sort of question, a slightly more theoretical question. I heard your presentation about the book as a presentation about a cautionary tale regarding conflicts that fall prey to patterns of overgeneralization, and in your story it's a particular pattern of ethnicization, that obscures some of the nuance that I think you bring out very nicely. And I'm just wondering if you see this book, while it deals very specifically with 1971, providing lessons for other conflicts and other contexts where this pattern of overgeneralization can be so troubling.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I'm Rajesh Kedi, and I've done some writing on South Asia. First, a comment on the Baluch. 2 battalions of the Baluch were stationed in East Pakistan, and both had served in Oman. And they were highly disciplined elite troops who were then shoved to East Pakistan as a sort of punishment that you've already spent a good time in Oman. So they were stationed in East Pakistan. The second is the number of anti-Indians that the Indians found among the Bengali elite, including General Osmani, for instance, and especially the elite that came back from West Pakistan. And I think that immediately changed the character because they are not directly involved with the atrocities or had seen the atrocities, but were more anti-Indian regardless. And my question to you is, did you interview some of the accused war criminals as well? There are going to be war crime trials.
I'm going to single out someone, and if he doesn't want to ask a question, he doesn't have to, but we have someone here who served as an American ambassador in both Bangladesh and Bill. Bill, do you have a question, or will you take a pass?
Well, I've been listening with great interest, and I really don't have a question, except that I wanted to point out that, and I wonder if Sarmila would agree with this, that I look upon this work as a very, very perceptive continuation of the sort of revision of the whole history of genocide that has been underway for about 10 years now. We haven't heard the word genocide, and I really wasn't going to ask this question unless or make this comment unless I heard it, and nobody has insisted on genocide. If they did, I didn't hear it. But we have revisions of the history of genocide in Europe, in Armenia, in Indonesia. There's some very good writing by Mr. Gerlach, who she referred to at some point. So this is a really, I think, another step in the sort of revision, and this segues on to Matt's point that this is something that that might give us some lessons for future, not just for future conflicts, because conflicts are pretty hard to stop when they start or divert, but for the future history of such conflicts.
All right, Sarmila, I'll give you one last chance, and then Arnold, if you want to weigh in one more time, you'll have the last word. Sarmila?
Right, Mr. Olson's question. Was there oversimplification? Yes, that it's now 40 years since 71, and there have been nationalist mythologies built up over this time, both in Bangladesh and in Pakistan. And both have indulged in oversimplification of what is a very complex conflict. In terms of whether 1971 can hold lessons for other conflicts, it's interesting. Certainly the Bangladeshi nationalists think that 71 is very exceptional, that it was something really unique in many ways. I would actually say, after my research, that many aspects of the 1971 war actually are not that exceptional. That is, 1971 was very much like other similar conflicts. A later conflict that comes to mind, which is similar, is in the former Yugoslavia, where there's very strong ethnic nationalism, sort of neighbors turning against each other type of war. But it's the problem with the 71 conflict has been that it has not been seriously studied for a very long time by, as I say, people who would be impartial and take into account everybody's views and all available facts and data. And this neglect has been, with the exception of Sisson and Rose, this neglect from the international scholarly community has probably been because Bangladesh was not considered important. And this is a very unfortunate thing. And so I'm pleased that there are some books now, other books also on the way. And this actually brings me more to Bill Milam's question as well. There are other people. It's very good thing that people who are, for example, genocide scholars, or Christian Gerlach, who studies mass killings in a variety of conflicts around the world, they are now taking an interest in East Pakistan, Bangladesh, 1971. And I think this is great for scholarship of this conflict, because they can bring a thematic expertise and a comparative perspective, and we will all gain from that. Rajesh's question, I'm not sure what the point was about the Baluch. As I said, the Baluch regiments certainly serving, but they are not full of ethnic Baluchis.
The ones that went to Oman were always full of ethnic Baluchis.
No, I have it from Pakistani generals that this is not the case. There are very few Baluch in state organizations in Pakistan, even now, and they said there weren't any. You asked whether I spoke to any war criminals. Certainly, well, several people I spoke to would be considered criminals on both sides. And this is actually, it's quite a heavy responsibility, and I have tried to put in my book, I have named many people, I found many people, named many people, and the names are there except for the ones taken out by my publishers. Because I am not the final arbiter on what can go into a publication. I certainly tried to speak to anyone whose name I found who had been in those incidents or in the areas that I was studying in particular. You'll see from my book, I've given a list of names. I've also given a list of people whom I found but who refused to speak to me. And there are some Pakistani army officers who refused to speak to me after I found them. You may conclude that those who refused had something to hide. I leave you to judge when you see who they are as to why they may have refused. Similarly, on the Bangladeshi side, I have, of course, spoken to many people who were involved in the combat. And there are accusations on both sides. So I suppose, yes, I have spoken probably to quite a number of people who would be considered war criminals by one side or the other. That's part of my work. I hope very much, there's actually a great need for some form of justice to be seen to have been done for all the people who were traumatized and suffered in that conflict. And I think that is really the duty of the international bodies, even at this late stage. And if my book and the grassroots work done in it contributes in any small way to that process, I would certainly be very happy.
Arnold Zeitlin, any last thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking now of the present. When you look at violence in Pakistan today, and when you look at Bangladesh and the killings of the crossfire killings of the Rapid Action Battalions, you can see that this violence that is chronicled in Professor Bose's book is not the exception, Ashad, it's the rule. And that's very sad.
I want to conclude by extending deep thanks to the audience here. I know many people here feel very strongly about it. You did not abuse the privilege of the mic when you had it, and I commend you and applaud you. I also encourage you to go out and buy this book. I have not had a chance to read it, as Sarmila just saw, as I said about her. She just got her copy a day or two ago. I would like to continue this discussion once we've all had a chance to read and to study the book and to compare it against other existing documentation. But at the moment, I think we've gone about as far as we can go. Please join me in expressing our appreciation to both speakers.